Tom, our next question comes from Eric. This question concerns how the domain or realm in which the larger consciousness system operates relates to or explains the domains or realms described in religions and philosophies, where the individual mind or consciousness has advanced beyond the need for reincarnation. Here are two examples. In Tibetan Buddhism, a sentient being, after many lives, gaining experience and realizations, and generating love and compassion, can become a Buddha. There is no more reincarnation, no more future lives. The ultimate has been reached, and there is nothing more to refine. In MBT terminology, this would seem to suggest that a Buddha is no longer subject to the LCS and is no longer an individuated unit of consciousness. In the late 19th century philosophical system of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky, there are hierarchical levels of existence, each of which is governed by laws, which perhaps have some equivalent rules in the LCS. At the human level on this planet, we are said to be governed by 48 laws. The next higher level is 24, then 12, 6, 3, and then 1, the absolute. The individual, through personal development during a life, can reincarnate into higher levels, then to the absolute, which is free from reincarnation. There is less constraint and more individual freedom for the entity at the higher levels of existence. A less tight rule set, perhaps. There are other examples, of course. In both the examples, here the individual mind or consciousness, through effort and development, which could be described as lowering entropy, reaches a state beyond reincarnation, which appears not to be possible within the LCS, where an IUOC is tied in forever. This is his phrasing. He says the big cheese who presides over the LCS is clearly superior to it. Are the Buddhas and other similarly realized beings who have gone beyond reincarnation also not at an equal level, at least, being free from the LCS? If it's possible to go beyond the LCS, then is there any reason why the LCS should be unique? And could there not be other LCS-like domains, other big cheeses, etc.? If so, could this perhaps be like the different Buddha realms described in Tibetan Buddhism, or the God realms that we see in different religions?
Okay. I've had similar questions to that before.
Okay.
And well, let me just start with saying that the big cheese does not preside over the larger consciousness system.
Right.
The big cheese is just one manager that is managing a region of, what can I say, a region that contains sentient beings. And the big cheese works for the larger consciousness system. So it's not above it, but it's a level below it. Anyway, so let's get on with this question. Yes, many religions and philosophies have some sort of end game, and I'll call it end game. That's kind of a term that says, this game is the entropy reduction trainer called, the Earth. And we're in this trainer, and is there an end game? So when you get to the end of the game, what happens then? When you evolve to the point that your entropy is zero, then what happens? Then you can't go anymore, topped out. And most religions and philosophies, I think, have adopted this idea that you finally get to the point where you get out of this entropy reduction game, get out of the reincarnation into a life where you have challenges and choices, and eventually you become a being of love and there's no more challenges. So you don't have to come here anymore, and you graduate into something else. Now, some of the Buddhists, that something else for them is a return to the Godhead. So you just become one with the LCS and you return to the LCS, and you're no longer an individual unit of consciousness. You're now just a piece of the larger conscious system. So that's one idea, is that you return to the larger conscious system. And other ideas, as he mentioned here, is that you kind of go beyond the larger consciousness system. And is it possible that there is another larger consciousness system sort of thing out there besides the one we're a part of? Well, that's possible, of course. In my book, I play with that possibility and talking about an Aomosaurus that is a creature that is, its very cells of that creature are Aom cells, which means the larger consciousness system just makes up a cell in a larger system. And that larger system may make up a cell in yet a larger system. So you have kind of this possibility of many systems nested like that. But all of these ideas about the end game after you graduate from this game, I think they exist because it's a much easier sell of your religion or your philosophy if you get to graduate from this, for most people, painful existence of hard choices that we have here in this entropy reduction trainer called the physical universe. So if you tell people, well, no, you just keep going round and round and round and round forever, and that's it. You just, you'll never retire. You never get to a point where you graduate from it. You just keep recycling and recycling, and that is all that there is. I think that's a real hard sell. People don't like that. They want to get through this difficult process and get to a point where it's not difficult anymore, where it's easy, where they've accomplished everything they need to accomplish. I think these ideas were created by people who were trying to make their particular philosophy or religion more friendly, more amenable, more sounds better, that we graduate and then we don't have to come back to this hard work. But I don't think that that's the way it works. That doesn't make any logical sense. Now, theology and philosophy often doesn't have to make sense. You can kind of make up what you want and claim that that is the way it is. But if you do that, you need to have some idea of what those beings are doing after they graduate. All right, as far as consciousness goes, they've hit the ultimate. They are low entropy consciousness. And just an aside, you never get to zero entropy. That's impossible, just by the nature of entropy. There's always some entropy there, and it gets to where your methods of reduction just get less and less effective because you have less and less distance to go. But reaching the zero entropy is not possible. There's always room to grow, and that's because evolution is open-ended. There's always more states, more configurations, more ways that you can evolve, more states you can evolve into. You take what we're doing here, and it all can repeat again in a bigger picture, and another bigger picture after that. So it doesn't end. Matter of fact, as you grow, your decision space gets bigger and bigger. So the more choices that the system has, it keeps expanding as the system grows up, as the system evolves toward lower entropy. So it's not that we're using up all the possibilities and one day we will have consumed all the possibilities. The possibilities keep growing as the decision space of the individuals that make it up, and that includes the larger consciousness system, as that decision space expands as they grow. And the larger conscious system is an evolving system. It's not done. I think there is no done. Evolution is open-ended. Think of our physical evolution. When is it done? Well, people say that, humans are going to kind of create by technology an exoskeleton that'll be strong and mobile and fast, and we'll end up with great big heads like this because we'll have great big brains and tiny little spindly bodies because we'll have machines doing all the work. And That's their idea of the future. Humans will evolve into these big heads and little scrawny bodies that will have power suits that they put on, which makes them, well, it sounds like Kid Vid, doesn't it? The Power Rangers are going to take over at the end. But you can look at things like that and say, well, where does it end? Where does evolution just say, I quit, I'm done, I've done everything that could be done? Never. They're never going to get to that point. Wherever you are, there is always possible changes that will make things better, not only for you, but for everything, for all the people, all the animals, all the plants, everything. So if everybody in our planet becomes very, very low entropy, well, then perhaps we will have to learn to socialize with and grow up with everybody in the Milky Way galaxy. And if the whole galaxy gets to be very evolved, well, maybe we'll all have to learn how to get along with those alligator people in the other galaxy. And if all of those finally get to very low entropy, well, there's probably another million galaxies we could go through with all kinds of people and shapes and things that would challenge us and challenge our behavior. So the system can grow, can morph, can change, can challenge us in ways we can't even imagine. Right now, we're having trouble just dealing with things that aren't just like us, even other humans. Other humans that aren't like us, we tend to dislike them and fear them. Oh, there's a human, and it's what? Homosexual or bisexual, or maybe they're even trisexual these days. I don't know. But, we have issues with that. We have trouble accepting that. We say, no, not like us. They're broken. We need to fix them. Oh, this person has what, ADHD or something. They're broken. We need to fix them. We've got a culture that everybody who's different than us, we label them broken and want to fix them and make them just like us. So, there's always going to be challenges of ways to do things better, ways to cooperate. And this growing is a very slow process because it's not an intellectual process. It's not that you figure it out. You have to become it. You have to live it. It's not being able to act like you're cooperative and act like, you have compassion. You have to be cooperative and be compassionate. You have to be kind, not just act kind. So it has to do with changing who you are inside. And we know that's a very slow process. It's not a process that gets done very quickly. So I see from my viewpoint this idea of, well, we get to be very low entropy, we graduate, we don't have to come back here anymore. I find that to be a high entropy concept. I think when somebody says, I am what? Enlightened. And because I am enlightened, I'm going to escape this stinking world of sweat, blood, and tears and going to not come back here anymore because I'm above all that. That to me sounds like ego talking. That sounds to me like self-centeredness talking. I don't want to come back here in this tough place. I want to go someplace where it's easy and nice and wonderful. And do what? What do you do when you're a low entropy entity and you're out there and maybe there's other low entropy? What do you do? Small talk forever? What do you do? You're all low entropy. Nobody really needs any help to grow up because everybody's grown up as much as they could. Well, what is it you do there? Sit on a fluffy cloud and learn to play the harp really, really good? You know, what's the next game that you're in? Well, if you're done, you're done. There is no next game. So what do you become? Useless? What do you do? How do you contribute? How do you maintain that sense of low entropy when there's nobody to help? How do you maintain helpfulness when there's nobody to help? How do you maintain cooperation when there's nobody to cooperate with? There's nothing to do. Everybody's perfect. How do you maintain compassion when everybody's perfect? Nobody needs any compassion. How do you maintain all that stuff? Well, we know about entropy. If you don't keep putting energy into lower entropy, entropy starts to go up all by itself. That's just the nature of entropy. So entropy always increases. So I think that what happens is instead of being self-centered and saying, glad to get out of this hellhole, I want to go to some place that's going to be nice and I'm going to be perfect, so I won't have anything to do. I'll just exist. Or I'm going to merge with the Godhead and I'll go back and be a part of the larger conscious system and I'll just cease to exist. None of those are helpful. None of those give anything. All of those are self-centered, really. They're not functional. So I think what happens is if you really are grown up and you get to that point where you don't need to have terrible stuff happen to you in order to grow up, you're already grown up, then what do? Well, it's not just about you, you see. You're supposed to be cooperative and helpful and caring. Well, then it's about others. You can go back for that next incarnation, even though you are very low entropy, not because you have to grow up more, but because now you know enough to be very helpful to a lot of people. You can serve as a good example. You can help raise the quality of entropy in others because you understand the process, you've been through it. So now there's some very important things that you can do now that you're all grown up and have a very low entropy consciousness. You can be helpful, kind, considerate. You can contribute. You see, there is something for you to do, and that is to go back and help others grow up. So here I am, and I'm all grown up, and I'm just a little being of love, and I don't want to go back there and help those people. I want to go on to where it's all love and peace, and I get to play a harp on a cloud all for eternity. None of that makes sense to me. So I think the end game is there is no end game. Evolution is open-ended. It keeps on evolving. And we are way too minuscule from our point of view to understand what the possibilities are. But there is a general rule that says the more you grow up, the easier it is to grow up more. The bigger the picture gets, you find another picture even bigger. So if we go from Earth to galaxy to super galaxy to the universe to other universes and other virtual realities you see, there's no end to where that can go. There's always going to be room to come back and be helpful, to actually share what you've learned, to be kind, considerate, compassionate, cooperative, not to ignore all those things that you've learned now that you get done. You don't have to be that anymore. You don't have to be caring or kind or considerate or cooperative. You can just kind of hang out with all the done guys. And they're doing what? Sipping mint juleps? What are you going to do forever? Well, that doesn't make any sense. So what you're going to do is you're going to come back here and teach. You're going to come back here and be challenged again. And if you really have grown up, then you'll maintain your high quality. But if you're not as grown up as you think you are because you really want to escape rather than come back and help, then you probably will find out that some of those times you come back, you actually de-evolve some by making some poor choices because you weren't quite as grown up as you thought. And now you have more work to do. So in any case, that I think the end game is that there is no end game. We keep going and the game just gets bigger and bigger. And it may get bigger than our entire universe, bigger than 100 other entire universes. And the game just goes on. And there's always a place for you to exercise your high quality of consciousness by being helpful and caring and cooperative and compassionate. You'll always have a place to exercise that because when you stop exercising that, stop putting effort into that, your entropy just starts to grow and you start to de-evolve for lack of practice. You have to practice it all the time. So that's not an easy sell. You say, okay, join my religion and you'll be at work forever. You'll never retire. You just have to keep working and working and
Yeah.
working forever. Or join this other religion where you escape and live a life of glory and ease and wonderfulness. What we can't describe what that is or what they do or how it works, but it's really going to be nice. Or you could go back and become part of the larger conscious system again and give up your individuality. That doesn't work either, because remember, the system was just one monolithic thing and its evolution required to break out individual pieces. So having all the pieces go
Yeah.
back and make another monolithic thing again when we're done is going backwards. That doesn't work. That's not the way it works. The way it works is you have more pieces with free will that all are active in cooperating and caring and loving each other. That's what works. So the idea of returning to the Godhead and become with one with God, well, you don't become one with God. You disappear. You're just part of the larger conscious system. You're not an individual anymore. So that one individuated unit of consciousness disappears. And now it's just part. That's going backwards. That's not going forwards. Going forwards is you make new IUOCs, which then have to grow up. And the old IUOCs come back and help that process.
More
And
diversity and more
yeah,
more experiences. Do you
exactly.
think, Tom, that there are some individuals here, perhaps, or other places that have gone further and further and then volunteered to come back with this more experience and higher quality to help out?
Well, everybody has to volunteer to do anything. There's no forcing factor in this at all. If you don't want to reincarnate, just say no. All right, go sit down. When you're ready to get back in the game, let us know. So nobody's ever forced to do anything. So everybody's a volunteer. Now, once they die here as an enlightened being, I think there's no such thing as an enlightened being. There's just different levels of evolution. You're evolving consciousness. All right, so you evolve it to where your entropy is 0.00001 and somebody else makes it 0.0000001. All right, now they're a higher quality consciousness than you are, but it doesn't make any difference. That kind of differentiation is ridiculous. It isn't important. You get to a level where you can help others. So you come back and help others. And in helping others, you grow more. And then you're better able to help others. And when you help others, you keep doing that. And if you're a 0.0000001 entropy, very small, well, then you're just better at helping others. And probably you'll go there and end up being born into a real rough situation, and maybe you'll backslide a little bit, and then you'll grow back up again. And it's just the nature of things, but the whole keeps growing. The whole keeps expanding its possibilities. It doesn't end. There is no end to evolution. Evolution takes whatever it has and it expands that. It creates better, newer, different configurations. Yes, we can add as many universes as we need. If we need, 1 trillion universes like this universe, then with trillions of galaxies like this galaxy and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of Earths like this Earth, if we need that with lizard people and smoke people and human people and, all sorts of things that we have to learn to love and care for and appreciate, all sorts of different kinds of things. Some nice, maybe some not so nice, but the whole point is it all has to evolve. It all has to eventually become love.
Well,
So that's unending.
yes, as you say, love is unlimited. So that makes sense because there are endless possibilities of learning more and more and becoming
Right.
more love.
Yeah.
And whereas going backwards or going with higher entropy is unsustainable and stagnant. So that does make some logical
Yeah.
sense.
Stagnation starts to decay, starts to de-evolve. If you say I'm done and I don't want to be helpful, I only care about me, I'm loose now. I don't have to go back to that awful place. Then that is one self-centered. It's not very low entropy. And you already have started to de-evolve just because you have that attitude. And I would say to somebody who declares that they are enlightened, I am now enlightened, so I won't come back anymore. I think that tells you immediately that they are not enlightened, or they wouldn't be able to make that statement. They would never be able to say that if they were truly enlightened. So I disagree with all those religions and all that philosophy about this unnamed, undescribed place that you go when you're done here, until somebody gives me a really good idea about what you do there and how is it you continue to grow there and how is it that you continue to become more love and maintain what you have, then to me it sounds more like a sales pitch that gives everybody a goal. What your goal is to grow up here and then escape the wheel of time, escape the circle of going round and round and round. And that gives people a happy thought of where they're going and gives them energy to keep chugging along so that they can escape. It gives them a goal to reach. But I think all of that is just good sales.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't see it
Well,
as good philosophy or even good theology.
in the video game world, leveling up is a boost in confidence. You keep leveling up, and that concept seems to resonate with people.
Yeah.
But there is an end to that too. Once you've gone to the highest level of one of those games,
Yeah. Then the people who make the games create new things for more levels.
yeah,
So it started out and the highest level was 20 way back when, and then it was 40, and then it's 60, and then it's 100. And if you want to keep the money coming in and you make a game, you don't want your people to quit when they get to the end, right? So when you have enough people, or even anybody who makes it up to the level 100, well, now there's going to be a level 150. It's going to come out with harder challenges and more things to do and tougher bosses to conquer and so on. So that's what happens in those games. People don't say, well, I'm a level 50 and that's as high as you can go, so I quit now. Whoa. The game maker doesn't want them to quit now. It wants them to keep paying that monthly fee to play the game. And that's the same thing the LCS will do. It can create the worlds, the adventures, the entropy reduction trainers for all sorts of levels. And I don't see that ever running out. I don't see that there's like, well, the game world will never get past level 10,000. Well, they might. Why would they stop at 10,000? Why would they not want their players to continue on? So I don't see that there's really a problem with that. The games are always going to have more levels, no matter where you get to. All right, you're not playing The Sims anymore. You're playing now a new Sims. It's Sims 1000, and it's got a lot more challenging stuff going on. Or in Sims 1000, you go back to Sims 1 and help the Sims characters in Sims 1, and maybe that's what you do. So we're not capable of really perceiving how all that works at that level. At so many levels above our pay grade that we don't really understand what's going on, but it's easy to see that there isn't any limitation to that. That can keep going on for a long, long, long time. The only limitation is when the LCS runs out of bits. Now it's got such a large and complicated system, it doesn't have any more bits. And then what any system would do is it would kind of reorganize its bits, get rid of the ones that are least useful, and use those new liberated bits to build more stuff so the world would get more efficient, more effective.
you can't go any further in your evolution if you're stagnant or have
Right.
de-evolved to such a state. The LCS would just reorganize and recycle those bits, I guess.
Yeah. If you're
Um,
just stale, not doing anything, if you're just sitting around kind of sucking your thumb in a corner someplace because you're done, then yes, you become useless bits.
It's not an
You know,
efficient
and
system anymore. LCS
no,
is an
right,
efficient system. Would you say
right.
that the physical rule set, as you say, the rubber meets the road, is the most efficient way? And if not, what kind of challenges are there in the non-physical, looser rule sets that can
Well, there,
help growth?
yeah. Well, there's a lot of different choices. You see, what makes a reality that's a tight rule set that's very physical, feels very physical, is that every interaction is part of the rule set. Every little interaction is an energy exchange somewhere, and it's all interactive. If I go to George and I say something to George, that may change George's attitude, change George's, I'll give him a piece of information or I'll challenge him to something or whatever. Now, George has to deal with what I gave him and he deals with that. He'll affect the other people in George's circle and they'll all interact with, you see, it all goes out. So if I tell Don, I say, Don, I don't want to do any more of these talks. I quit. Well, now that will affect Donna, but it'll also affect at least what 115,000 people who are subscribers to my channel because they won't get any more content. And that will change them. And then they will affect other people. So the beauty of a tight rule set that's physical is that everything you do affects other people. So you do things and you don't do it in a vacuum. You're not on an island. What you do and what you say and how you do it is important. And because it's important, that's how you're able to evolve because of doing it well rather than doing it poorly. If you do low entropy things, if you do things in kindness and love and caring, then you level up. But I don't see an end in the leveling up process. I see that will always be there for people to grow because once you get to the top and say, well, there's no more room to grow, then you've automatically created something dysfunctional because the entropy will start to increase because they don't have any way to practice decreasing it. And you have something that just uses up bits but doesn't do anything. If the entropy doesn't decrease and just say we change the rules of entropy and it just stays there and stays perfect, well, you're wasting bits. It's not doing anything. It's not accomplishing anything. It's a dead player. So you'll take those bits and put them back down in the bottom where they can be useful. There's just no point in it unless I get a really good description of what those done people do all day and how they are forwarding the evolution of the system. Then I'll change my mind. Well, I won't really change my mind. I'll say, yeah, that's right. They have to get back in the game. They have to be part of some game somewhere and be contributors. You can't just sit out and say, I'm not contributing anymore. I'm just on the sidelines. I just watch now. Well, that's like giving up your life to watch TV. You know where that will get you. That'll get you probably a heart attack or cancer or something to just sit around, eat popcorn and watch TV. It's not a healthy life. It doesn't take you anywhere important. So just graduating from this, cycle of birth and death is a really attractive idea to people who feel like this is hard. This is a lot of work. This is suffering here. I want to get out of the suffering. So I'm going to learn. I'm going to grow up so I can get out of the suffering. Okay. So that's an incentive, but it's an incentive. It's like giving children an incentive. If you do all your homework and you're good little boys and girls, I'll take you out later and buy you an ice cream. Okay, it's a bribe, it's an incentive, but it doesn't have any functional possibilities that I can see for the
Right.
system. It is dysfunctional. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And having a lot of dysfunctional bits that don't have anything to do because they're already perfect doesn't, to me, do anything. And if they're already perfect, then they can't grow. They can't become anything else. Well, how are they going to contribute? Only one way I know of. You get back in the game and you help other people grow up. That's kind of the
Yes.
choice. Or you go to some other game and help those people grow up. There's not that many people who get that highly evolved anyway. It's not like, oh, there's going to be millions of these done people. No, the rate of evolution goes, if you trickle out, a dozen, every year, that would be a lot. You don't get a lot of people who grow up that much. It's a hard thing to do. And the world needs a lot of more teachers than it has. So, okay, there's a lot of holy men on the planet. There's people who are good teachers and have grown up a lot, but we could use a lot more. So it's not like the game's already full of teachers. We don't need any more. No, even if you just come here and don't do anything else other than be a good example of what happens when you have a low entropy consciousness. You smile, you're happy, people like to be around you, you're a good problem solver, you just help everything. You don't have to do anything special. You don't have to all, create a tidal wave of change with your brilliance. Just being a good example would be wonderful. If we had, just think if every 1,000th person was a really good example, how much further ahead we'd be. Even if every 100,000th person was a really good example, we'd be a lot further ahead than we are now. You can probably count all the really highly grown people, on maybe more than two hands, but it's certainly a small number compared to 9 billion of us. So that's my take on the idea of what is the end game. And that's why I see it that way. And I've been to a reality that you can look up if you go to my search engine to search through all of my talks, search for the done reality, and you'll find a little talk about a reality where people who thought they were done and refused to come back because they were done, they put them in a reality. And eventually they realized that they were de-evolving. And when they did, the aha moment came and they went back into the system. And that was the done reality.
I remember the done reality. You did that in Poland very well. We gave a clip from that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think you answered that really well, Tom. Thank you so much. You have more power than you think. Hi, this is Donna from MBT Events. I have had the privilege to work with Tom Campbell for nearly 20 years now, and I can tell you from the feedback received through all those years that he has improved and changed thousands of lives with his My Big Toe theory. As a physicist and explorer of the larger reality, Tom has developed a program where you can learn to access and develop your natural ability as consciousness. His expertly crafted binaural beats are included. Details are in the description below. Thank you.
I and MBT Events hope you like this video. If you do, then you should consider being a Patreon member, because Patreon members get early access to our special content. You will also be able to get your questions answered by me in special Q&A sessions, and most importantly, your contribution as a patron member will enable us to produce the content that you're looking for. So thank you.